Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Welcome to episode 32 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Wolak, joined as always by my co-host, Devin Little. And our other co-host, Evan Sabrin, is currently working the NFL draft. So while he misses out on this, he's still having a lot of fun with that. So welcome to the episode. We have a lot to get into. Have a team review for 5-on-5 offense, player evaluations, and our first draft pick overview. So lots to get into today. First off, episode 32 is kind of special for me because I've always worn number 32. I played goalie, so the number actually made sense. But ever since I was, 7 years old, I've been wearing number 32, and there's a reason for that. The first hockey card I ever got was Tim Shovelday, and I wanted to be a goalie. I thought he looked real cool in his equipment with the checkered flags on his helmet too. And ever since then, I've been wearing number 32. I know it's kind of an obscure goalie reference, especially for those on the younger side of things. But I don't know. Like as time went on, not too many other Red Wings wore number 32. I think Stu Grimson did for a little bit, and Max Kuznetsov, and we can just throw out a bunch of puck doku names here. But I felt like I kind of owned that number growing up because there weren't a lot of 32s playing, in the leagues that I was in, and even in travel and juniors in college. Goalies were either, 30, 31 or number one. There's never really a 32. So, yeah. Devin, how about you? Did you ever wear a particular number growing up that you always like to defaulted to?
Well, first and foremost, I can always count on you for a obscure goalie reference, right? Yeah, I actually had two numbers that I wore with some regularity. I wore number 26. That's just kind of my lucky number. If I have to pick a number for something, whether it's a sport or event or whatever, a number between 1 and 50, I usually pick number 26. And then if 26 wasn't available, or there was a season where I played goalie and I wanted a number in the 30s, I picked number 39, and that's to honor another goalie, pretty well-known one around these parts. That's Dominik Hasek, of course. Definitely wore 26 more than 39, but if I wasn't wearing 26, I was very privileged to be able to pay homage to the Dominator, and that was right around the time that he was on his way to winning a Stanley Cup with the Red Wings in 2002. So thank you for making me feel old, Tony.
Hey, man, Shovelday played 10 years before that. Quite a talent discrepancy as well between the two goalies that we represented. But yeah, so let's dive in. We have a lot to get to, as I mentioned, in today's episode. First off, we're going to kick off our first of a 4-part team review. Today, we're going to talk about the 5-on-5 offense. In upcoming episodes, we'll cover the 5-on-5 defense, special teams, and goaltending. So starting today with offense, it was a bit of a down year for the Red Wings offensively, partially because they did so well last year, but in any sense, their goal scoring was down this year. Roster changes happened over the summer. Shane Gostisbehere left. Jake Wallman was traded. Robbie Fabry was traded. Daniel Sprong left. David Perron left. A lot of these players, contributed mightily to the Red Wings offensive game, but their replacements, while, providing a little bit of improvement on defense, couldn't quite cover that ground offensively. So when you're looking at the 2024-25 Red Wings, their 5-on-5 goals, it was actually down 22% from the previous year, going from 2.7 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 to 2.1 this year. The 2.1 goals per 60 at 5-on-5, that ranked 30th in the league. So it's not that they were, middle of the pack and they had a slight decrease. It was actually quite a bit of a drop off. Their shot attempts for, their expected goals for, and their high danger chances for as a team at 5-on-5 did see some, moderate increases. Expected goals for went up 6.64%. High danger chances went up 7.25%. But those still ranked in the bottom third of the league. Last year, the Red Wings did generate a bunch of 5-on-5 offense off the rush, off of quick strike attacks. So it didn't require a whole lot of attempts to, reach their goal total in comparison. But yeah, this year it just wasn't the same style of team. And offensively, they did seem to falter a bit. And it's certainly evidenced by a 22% drop in goal scoring. So Devin, I'll turn it over to you next. What did you see from the offense this year, both positively and negatively?
Well, it's obviously a little bit of a tale of two seasons, right? They definitely handled themselves way differently under head coach Todd McClellan than they did under former head coach Derek Lalonde. When they were at their best, when they had those nearly back-to-back 7-game win streaks, I think a big characteristic of how they played at 5-on-5 is they really kept it simple, and they really funneled pucks towards the net. Especially in prior seasons, whether it was under Derek Lalonde or Jeff Blashill, the Red Wings had a weird tendency or a bad tendency to kind of always look for the perfect play and try to hit that. And they almost never had the talent to do it. And that's what was frustrating. But then also, you're passing up good shot opportunities to generate, whether just a quality chance or maybe a rebound. You're passing that up because you're trying to thread the needle on this tic-tac-toe play that's not actually there. I think that when they were at their best this year, they were not trying to do tic-tac-toe all over the place. I think that they were just finding good shooting and passing lanes, executing and getting the puck on net. But then I think that when they were at their worst, it's almost like you see them thinking too much. And we kind of go back to that famous quote from Todd McClellan early on in his tenure, play effing hockey, right? The Red Wings looked their best when they played loose and they played instinctually. When they started to second guess themselves, grip the sticks a little bit tighter, start to think about things a little too much, that's when I think you'd see mistakes happen and the well dry up, basically. And then also to kind of compound the issue too, you mentioned all the losses they had last offseason in terms of just offensive talent that went out the door. The top six was fairly potent throughout the season. If both lines weren't going, at least one of them usually was. Definitely a lot of times where Lucas Raymond looked like a phenom. Alex DeBrincat nearly scored 40 goals. So they had guys going throughout the season. But that bottom six really didn't help out a whole lot. And I mean, to be fair, you look at the talent group that they had for the most part, and there's not really a lot of gunslingers down there. You could make the argument that Jonathan Berggren was probably your best offensive player in the bottom six, but even then, though, the best teams in this league are able to produce offense with at least 3 lines, and honestly, the best ones do it with 4. If you're pretty much putting the sole responsibility of producing goals on 2 lines, not only are you not going to win a lot of games or win enough games, but your offense isn't going to go in the right direction, and that's exactly what we saw with the Red Wings this season.
You hit on a few points that I had very similar findings when I did my report on the team this season. You mentioned just the depth, and yes, they did lose quite a few players who were depth scorers or players who could get to high danger chances or high danger areas to score, but the players that they brought in or the players who stepped into larger roles, they just couldn't keep up. So I took a look at Detroit's forward group and defense and kind of put some numbers together. So if you look at the top 5 forwards, not 6, 5, because the Red Wings really did have 5 top 6 forwards, being Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat, Kane, and Casper. So those players at 5-on-5, they scored 71 goals. And this is 2 more than the top 5 players did last season. It's the same player, just swap out Casper and swap in David Perron. So pretty consistent group there. The depth scorers, every other forward beyond those 5, they only scored 53 goals. And that same group, or the same type of players as depth players, scored 65 goals the previous season. So that's an 18% drop. One thing that we kind of touched on earlier was the change on defense. Gostisbehere and Wallman out, Edvinsson in on a regular basis, but also Gustafsson and Albert Johansson in. The 5-on-5 goals from Detroit's defensemen dropped from 33 to 19 year over year. That's a 42% drop. That was, in my mind, almost as, if not more significant than the depth forwards and their lack of, contribution. But suffice to say, apart from the main goal scorers and the main producers who you expect to produce and did produce, Detroit's depth and defense just as a whole could not, keep up. And that, I think, was one of the things that did them in, their lack of depth in terms of scoring. One other thing I found was that they just couldn't get the high danger chances on a consistent basis. Now, look, I know I mentioned that the team actually got a little bit better in terms of high danger chances for per 60 at 5-on-5, a 7% increase. It's still ranked 28th in the league, 9.61 per 60. That's just not good enough. And like I said last year, they converted more. That's why they scored. They scored more. They converted those more often. They still had few high danger chances this year. They just didn't convert as many. So you think hopefully next year, we saw a little bit of an uptick in that area with McClellan. Hopefully, next year they are able to convert more often, turn to more of a puck luck thing. But still, just the makeup of their roster, the team just couldn't get to those areas on a consistent basis. One player who did was Elmer Soderblom, and he was only up for 26 games. His 5.25 individual high danger chances for per 60, that was actually 11th best in the league, for players who played 100 minutes. 10th best. 11th best. Mixing up my numbers here, but still. Being a top 11, 10 player in the league for getting to those high danger areas, that's great. They need more of that. Frankly, Soderblom should be on the team from the start next year, but we'll get more in depth on his performance later on. Between the lack of high danger chances and the lack of scoring depth, that's why you saw such a significant drop off, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. And I guess if there's one reason to be optimistic heading into next season, you mentioned one of them, Elmer Soderblom. We should expect to see an influx of offensive talent, both on the prospect side and honestly, probably in free agency or a trade or so, outside of the organization right now. We should probably see an influx of talent over the off season. Soderblom should be a day one player, regular NHLer starting next season. Carter Mazur will factor in. I don't know that he's going to contribute a ton of offense, but he should be able to help. Nate Danielson will be right there. You go down the list. There's plenty of offensive prospects that should be able to at least challenge to contribute. And then that doesn't even go into all the fun names that we could talk about in the future that they could target in trade talks and free agency talks as well. So just because things were bad this season doesn't mean they're definitely going to be bad next season. And in fact, I would even argue that they won't be as bad as they were this season. It's almost impossible because you're going to see continued growth from within.
Knock on wood for that one, right?
Absolutely.
And one more thing to add is, at the time of our recording, there was a report that came out from the fourth period that the Red Wings were exploring making some coaching changes. Now, since Todd McClellan came to the Red Wings with Trent Yawney, and Trent Yawney, oversees the defense, you have to assume that means either Jay Verity or Alex Tangay or both are the coaches who will be on the outs and then bringing someone else in to replace them. So Tangay obviously oversees the offense. Offense has performed poorly, and so while he seems to be a great coach, great mentor, and great with the power play, just the numbers aren't lining up where this team needs to be. And so that's between those two coaches, like there probably will be some change. And, I speculated in the past about potentially Jay Woodcroft rejoining the Red Wings, since he's been an assistant with McClellan for 10 years, since pretty much McClellan left the Red Wings back in 2008. So there's certainly potential there, but I'm sure the news will come out right after we stop recording tonight. All right, so now we're going to get into our player evaluations. These are going to be spread over the course of the next few episodes. Today, we're going to cover 3 players: Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, and Alex DeBrincat. So starting with Detroit's captain, Devin, I'll turn it over to you first. What did you see from him this year? It seemed to be an up and down year for him, mostly good, but obviously ended not the best way with the injury after the Four Nations tournament. That clearly affected his game down the stretch.
Yeah, no kidding. I think that as much as I said, the Red Wings as a whole had kind of a tale of two seasons. Larkin did too, but it's not split down the middle at all. It's very much before Four Nations and then after Four Nations. Larkin failed to meet over the prior 3 seasons, he's been at a point per game pace or just right below it. And this season he had 70 points in 82 games. So still solid, of course, but not point per game at all. And I think that a lot of that came after Four Nations, and he even admitted in his season end availability that he's a little dinged up after that. Had a few small injuries, and you kind of wonder how did that impact the Red Wings' fortunes in terms of their playoff chase. Should Larkin have gone? I mean, good luck telling any player to not go represent their country, even in a tournament that's not the Olympics. But you know what? How does the Red Wings season look different if Larkin doesn't get hurt? If he's still at 100% after that tournament? But I digress. I still think he's the Dylan Larkin we all know and love. When he's on his best, he's got that motor that no one can really stop. Still very much has going chemistry with Lucas Raymond. I mentioned, I think last week, that sure seems like anyone that plays with Larkin and Raymond all of a sudden looks like a top line talent. I mean, even Joe Veleno looked really good when he played with those two. And I mean, regardless of the regression of his numbers this season, he is still without a doubt the Red Wings top center. And he very well should be heading into next season with that title as well. I really don't see anyone challenging him for that spot over the next year or two. If Marco Kasper continues to show growth like he did this year, I could see him challenging in the future, but that's still a while away, and I'm getting way ahead of myself. But I think that it was an understandably frustrating season for Larkin, both as an individual and as a member of this team. And I think that he's going to be a real driving force behind this team wanting to end that playoff drought next season.
It's strange because there was a clear drop off after the Four Nations tournament, but he still had 20 points in 27 games. So it's not like he completely fell off the face of the earth. And that was on par with Lucas Raymond too in that time span. But one main difference was those two also were on the ice for a lot of goals against post Four Nations, and that wasn't the same case beforehand. So, but back to Larkin, I agree. It was a tale of two seasons for sure. But in the grand scheme of things, I think he was good. He had the most difficult deployment among forwards, for the Red Wings in terms of facing off against elite competition. League wide, the second most difficult behind Mitch Marner. So clearly he is their go-to guy still. And, for having a good season, he performed pretty well against elite competition as well. Had very good transition micro stats. He was solid at both ends, both from the eye test and from micro stats point of view. But you're right, he did fall short of where you're hoping him to be by the end of the season, around a point per game. Fell short of my scoring projections, which was right around that. He did score quite a bit on the power play, 13 power play goals, which was 13th best in the league. But I think what it all comes down to is Larkin was good this season, but the team needs him to be great if they're going to make the playoffs. If he's their 1C, you need that player to be great for your team to have success, especially if you don't have the depth scoring to back him up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want this to be all negative because like you said, he was good. He cemented his fourth straight 30-goal season. At this point, you can confidently go into next season and beyond and pretty much pencil him in for at least 30 goals. I mean, that's definitely a nice luxury to have. And he should be a pretty safe lock for at least 70 points. You again, for a 1C, you want him to be higher than that. And he knows that. But he's kind of their security blanket or their safety net in terms of their offense. You kind of know what to expect from him at this point in his career, and you know that you can expect a fair amount from him, not just offensively, but defensively too, and in his role as the captain as well. So anyone who watches this team knows he's got more to give. He's got another level. He didn't quite hit it this season. In fact, I think, sad to say, but I dare say the best hockey he played this season was actually with Team USA. And maybe that'll be another reason he's looking really good next season, because the Olympics are coming and he should be a factor for Team USA again. But yeah, I'm not worried about Dylan Larkin. I'll be worried if we're having the same conversation next season. But I don't foresee that happening. And I think that I guess to slightly pivot here, I've seen some crazy stuff over the last couple of days regarding Dylan Larkin. Not even just within the Red Wings fan base, but outside of the fan base. I feel like this player is there's underappreciated, and then there's whatever Dylan Larkin is, because he's actually almost getting into disrespected territory. I'm seeing people, throw up trade offers where you can get him for a first round pick and one other thing. Good luck with that. This player is way better than I think a lot of people realize. And I'll give those people some credit. 70 points in 82 games doesn't scream I'm elite, but anyone that's watched this guy for as long as we have, i.e. his whole career, knows that 70 points in 82 games does not accurately describe the caliber of player that Dylan Larkin is.
What do you think of his comments at the end of your availability?
Oh boy. I think Dylan Larkin really wants to get into the playoffs. I think that he, just like every Red Wings fan, can't believe that the playoff streak is the playoff drought is at where it's at. And he's also, most players do not care about draft picks. The only ones that really do are probably the ones that are in the tail end of their career and they're starting to learn that things because they're maybe going to take a front office job in the future. But generally, players that are in the middle of their careers are not thinking about who the team's going to draft in the fourth round. And honestly, I know a lot of people kind of focus in on the trade deadline comment he made, and I'll let you talk about that, Tony. The comment that really stood out to me was his comment. I don't remember what he said exactly, but he made a comment about how the players that the Red Wings draft in the 4th round this year, by the time they make it to the NHL, if they make it to the NHL, Larkins might not even be there anymore. And if he is there, he's the Patrick Kane, basically, the older veteran that has been there, done that, and is not the same player he used to be. To me, that's not only is that an urgent, I want to get back in the playoffs. He's only been to the playoffs once in his whole career, but I think that's also kind of a window into the fact that Larkin's kind of cognizant of where he's at in terms of his career timeline. He's halfway through his career at this point. And his prime years, he's only got so many of those left too. I think he very much knows that if he's going to win the Stanley Cup with the Red Wings, it probably has to be within the next 5 years or so if he's going to be a key member of it. He may very well win the Stanley Cup with the Red Wings in 8 years, but he probably won't be the first line center at that point. He will be that Patrick Kane type of role. I imagine he wants to win the Stanley Cup as the captain, as the top line center. And if that's going to happen, then the team has to make moves, whether that's at the deadline or in the off season. Again, another situation where people are, making a whole lot about this, and I get it. But really, I don't think it's anything more than this dude wants to make the playoffs, and he's aware that he does not have decades left in this league.
Yeah, for those who may not have heard what he said or just haven't dug into it. So during Larkin's end of year availability, he unprompted brought up the trade deadline and said, we didn't do anything. We didn't gain any momentum from the trade deadline. Guys were kind of down about that. Also added that it would be nice to add something and bring a little bit of spark on the ice and maybe a morale boost as well. And so there's been quite a bit of banter about that just because it's the captain and he is not happy about the team's lack of activity at the trade deadline. Sounds like he's calling out the general manager a little bit. He's frustrated. Also, it sounds like, not great leadership to some people that he is talking about how the team morale was down when it is the captain's job to have a pulse on things and not let the morale get there. So I won't spend too much time on this because it's been discussed ad nauseum across the internet. To me, I don't think it was a good look. And I totally understand where he's coming from in terms of just frustration with not making the playoffs. He's been there the entire playoff drought. You're right, Devin, he's only been in the playoffs once. He wants to get back there. And, adding a player is sort of a manager's vote of confidence in the team. It says, hey, I believe in you. Here's an extra boost. I believe you guys can make the playoffs. Now, where I run into issue with the comments was it's more from a leadership standpoint and just I think you have to have more tact than that. If you're the captain of the team, it almost sounded like he was blaming someone else for the team missing the playoffs and blaming someone else for the team's low morale, when that is 100% his responsibility to, lead that team. And God knows how many times, at the beginning of the season when the team was not doing well, Larkin and other players said, hey, no one's coming here to save us. It's up to us to, right the ship. And what he kind of said during the interview was, hey, no one was there to save us. So that to me says all right, there's a lesson to learn here. That's not the type of leadership you want to convey. It's more of a closed door conversation to have with Yzerman about in the future what he can do to help the team and how the locker room is feeling about this, and even having these conversations leading up to the deadline. Another takeaway I had from this is all of these players have been brought in to insulate the team, provide leadership, lead them, help the young players, come along. I'm talking, Ben Sherratt, JT Comfort, Jeff Petrie, Andrew Kopp. And like, while Petrie and Kopp were injured during that time frame around the trade deadline and may have been like away from the team, it does reflect on that leadership group. Like, this is the exact reason why you were brought in, to lead this team. And the fact that the team was like sulking after the trade deadline when they weren't that far out of a playoff spot, but it was in their hands to take control of the situation and didn't. What does that say about the players that they brought in? Like, that is not a good reflection on the leadership group. And I do think there needs to be some sort of change there to actually bring in leaders, because the players that they have right now, they aren't that. Larkin aside, I think he's obviously still young. It's a learning lesson. Like, I'm sure Yzerman had plenty of lessons when he was a young captain, but it, to me, reflects more poorly on the players than it does on the lack of activity from the general manager standpoint. Because, like, let's be honest, the trades that went down around the trade deadline were absolutely ridiculous from a buyer standpoint, and the Red Wings just really weren't in position to give up a lot for a little, given how poorly they had been playing leading up to the trade deadline.
I want to jump on that real quick too. If you really want your general manager to invest in your team, invest those future assets that only matter to the front office, you got to win games. And the Red Wings were on a 4-game losing streak heading into the trade deadline. I don't know too many teams that are trending down that then buy at the deadline. Honestly, when they made the deal with Chicago, I was a little surprised, because I was honestly expecting them just to like sit still, just like they did last year. Yeah, I mean, even bringing in Peter Mrazek, I know it's not like a huge upgrade, but it was an attempt to like stabilize the goaltending a little bit. And I do feel like Craig Smith was an improvement on the fourth line, maybe a very slight improvement over Joe Veleno. So like, I get it, not like a giant, leap forward, excuse me, with that move, but it was something. Yzerman threw him a bone. It wasn't a juicy bone, but it was a bone. If you want him to pay the prices, like you said, Tony, that were being paid on that day, you got to be trending upward, and they were not. And that's something that I do feel like, that's where I come back to. This is Larkin just being the player and not thinking about the big picture. It's not really his job to think about the big picture, excuse me. Eventually I think he will get there. But for the time being, you got to be heading in the right direction if you want to see your team ahead of the deadline. And then also, real quick too, I also want to echo what you said there. Can you imagine being Craig Smith and Peter Mrazek, being brought in, being the trade deadline acquisitions, and then you hear Larkin going, they didn't do anything for us at the deadline, man. Like, Mrazek's still under contract for next year, dude. Like,
oh man. Well, I mean, look, hopefully this is just like a lesson learned for Larkin in particular from a leadership standpoint. And, maybe Yzerman likes the fire that Larkin is showing, that like he wishes they did something and being outward about it and not like hiding his feelings. But I get it. I get the frustration. I get why the Red Wings didn't do anything. I get that emotions were probably pretty high with the season over and missing the playoffs yet again. I can certainly get it if there's people in the front office who were a little scorned after hearing those comments. But, we'll see how things play out this summer with getting this team where it needs to be. Now, one player who we don't really need to worry about in that regard is Lucas Raymond, who had an outstanding campaign. And when we thought he had a breakthrough campaign last year, he took it to a whole nother level in 2024-25. So he finished the year with 27 goals, 53 assists, and 80 points in 82 games. He frankly was outstanding for the Red Wings. He exceeded my projections for for the season in terms of scoring. Just like Larkin, since they were on the same line for most of the year, he had a very difficult deployment in terms of Red Wings forward. So he was producing against the league's best on a nightly basis. So, when we kind of talk about the rebuild as a whole and not landing a first overall pick, well, Red Wings got a lottery pick, a top 3 pick, if not by number, by talent in Lucas Raymond. And this season showed exactly why.
I agree. I think so. First and foremost, what I want to say about Lucas Raymond is if he is not there yet, he is almost a superstar. Like, I think we need to. Whenever I hear that talk about how the Red Wings don't have a superstar and that's why they're not where they want to be, and this and that and this that, I always think, you guys watch Lucas Raymond do anything? Because quite frankly, I know that he doesn't have a 100-point season under his belt or anything like that, but he has he's trending in the right direction in that regard. First 80-point season this season, and I honestly think that the best is still yet to come. I mean, let's be real here. He's still only 23 years old, and would it really be that shocking if he still has another year left in him? I mentioned before that Larkin and Raymond are really kind of, and it seems like they're kind of entrenched together. They've really got that chemistry going. They make their other line mate better, no matter who it is. But I also think that, in seasons past, Derek Lalonde, and I'm pretty sure it was just Derek Lalonde, kind of was attempting to get Raymond to carry his own line. You'd see him separated from Larkin from time to time. And it yielded varying results. This season, one line combination that really intrigued me, and I kind of would like to see it again at some point, was the line where Raymond, Marco Kasper, and Elmer Soderblom played together. That was the all rebuild line you mentioned in the past, Tony. Really liked the mix there, not just from a skill standpoint and from they were all drafted by the Red Wings standpoint, but it's just a little bit of everything going on in that line. Hard to play against Soderblom, hard to play against Kasper, hard to play against Raymond. And I think that Raymond has slowly developed the ability to make his line mates better along with Larkin. And I think that you saw that on that line. I really think that, as great as that Kasper, DeBrincat, and Kane line was, and that is something that they should go back to in the future. I do think that they should keep that Kasper, Soderblom, and Raymond line in their back pocket, because I think they might have something with that. And I guess what my point is with that is that Raymond is at least showed to be better this season at carrying his own line than he did in years past. And when you are able to carry your own line, I feel like that to me is the sign that you've arrived and you're kind of into the top echelon of players. Now there's subcategories within that top echelon of top players, but I think Raymond's in that conversation now. And I think that in terms of the star power the Red Wings do or don't have, I think the conversation, quite frankly, probably starts with Lucas Raymond, because he has the numbers to back it up. And I think that he still has the potential to really enter that top echelon of point producers in the NHL.
And his micro stats really back that up too, because he was effective in the offensive zone. He was effective in the defensive zone as well, which I was honestly not surprised to see, but it's always encouraging to see, especially with younger players. He had strong zone exit with possession numbers, also good zone entry numbers when heading towards the offensive zone. Passing, all different components of it, rated highly. He was actually fourth in the league in power play points per 60 with 8.79, which I guess kind of surprising, but also kind of not, knowing how well the Red Wings power play did. But still, 4th is pretty good in the entire NHL. So you're right. He was great with Larkin, great without Larkin, and great in all situations as well. He actually was one of their better penalty killers on the season. So that to me was I don't know. I don't know if that's more of an indication of his strength on the penalty kill or everyone else's. But I guess one thing to kind of hammer home your point about Lucas Raymond and being able to skate without Larkin if need be. Raymond without Larkin in how many? 231 minutes of 5-on-5 play. He actually had 0.78 goals against per 60. That is a really, really good defensive number for a highly offensive player. So, yeah, so it's, while obviously the Red Wings could probably use another top 6 talent or two to help balance things out a little better, give them a little bit more flexibility with the players on the different lines. It is good to know that if need be, Raymond can skate apart from Larkin and still thrive. So that was obviously a great thing to see this season. Another player who thrived was Alex DeBrincat. Like you mentioned before, almost hit 40 goals, 39. But in my opinion, the Alex DeBrincat that we saw this season was the player that they went out and acquired during the 2023 offseason. He was fantastic. He was consistent this year, less streaky in terms of goal scoring. There were hot streaks for sure, but there were less cold streaks compared to a year ago. He, was on pace with scoring projections, finished with 70 points. It was not just the offensive game that stuck out for me for DeBrincat, and I'm sure that this is the same for you, Devin, but I actually thought he was pretty good defensively this year. And I know that's not what you're acquiring him for, but he, just like, Lucas Raymond, he had very good zone exit microstats, very good zone entry microstats. He was dependable versus elite competition. And you often saw him out on the ice late in the game protecting a lead when the other team had their goalie pulled. I know in the past it was more like Raymond and Larkin and GT Comfer or Rasmussen and Kopp and Comfer or whatever combination it is, not DeBrincat. He was out there quite a bit. And that goes to show that, he had the coach's confidence to hold that lead and to, do well defensively. And when you have a 40 goal scorer who is being counted on like that and actually doing pretty well, that's a great thing for a team that's, trying to take it to the next level. Oh, and he had 14 power play goals, which was 5th best in the league too. So, Alex DeBrincat, all-around player.
Yeah,
we saw that coming, didn't we? Alex DeBrincat, great in all 3 zones.
All right, let's start the DeBrincat for Selke watch next season right now. Let's get out ahead of that one. Statistically speaking, this was DeBrincat's 3rd best season from an offensive standpoint. 3rd most goals, 3rd most points. His best season since leaving the Blackhawks. I think that how you described him off the top is the perfect way to describe it. This is the player that the Red Wings went out and made that trade with the Senators for. And honestly, as close as he got this season, agonizingly close. I really do think he can get it done next season. I think like I said, 3rd best season. This is the closest he's been to his form in his early days with the Blackhawks that he's been really since then. And all indications are that his good buddy Patrick Kane at least will do his darndest to remain in Detroit, and he's got that chemistry with DeBrincat. And if all else fails, we know that Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat line can cook too. So I see no reason why DeBrincat can't build on this and continue to be honestly a really, really underrated offensive player in terms of the league standing, because You look at the top goal scorers in the league. He's not there at first glance, but you only have to scroll down a little bit to find his name. And I couldn't even tell you the last time the Red Wings had a player that scored goals at that type of volume.
All right, so that wraps up our player evaluations for this episode. We'll have more for you next week. But next, we are going to cover our first draft profile of the summer. And the player that we chose today was someone who Devin and I are both high on. Probably will be gone by the time the Red Wings, draft. But, who knows? They could trade up. Things could happen. Player could fall. We'll see. So for this, we're going to cover Jake O'Brien, center, highly talented center. And I'll give the mic over to Devin to talk about him a little bit, hype him up, and explain why the Red Wings should be, watching him and following him and drafting him this season.
A few weeks ago, you and I highlighted a few way too early targets for the Red Wings in this draft. And if I remember correctly, I labeled Jake O'Brien as like the Red Wings guy in this draft because he has all of those traits that have kind of become synonymous with the Red Wings. He's a two-way competitive forward with a high motor and very, very high hockey IQ. Who does that sound like? Pretty much every Red Wings first round pick in the last 5 years. Now, with that being said,
no one really comes to mind there.
Right.
Every forward pick the Red Wings have had since the rebuild started. But continue.
In fact, when I kind of look at him a little bit deeper, I even think of a very specific Red Wings prospect. That being Nate Danielson, actually. He's a very, like I said, has all those traits just like Nate Danielson. Jake O'Brien's probably biggest calling card as a forward is his playmaking ability. He definitely has that ability to make his teammates better, thread the needle with a pass. And in fact, one of his drawbacks maybe is that he can sometimes be a little too unselfish. He's always looking to make a play instead of finish one or, And Nate Danielson, even going back to his draft year, highly competitive, great two-way forward that has some really high playmaking ability as well. I mean, they're even physically speaking, their measurements are very similar. Jake O'Brien's the Nate Danielson of this draft. I'm willing to kind of call that early. And with that being said, I mean, if the Red Wings clearly like Nate Danielson, they made him a top 10 pick 2 years ago. Goes to show that they probably really like Jake O'Brien. And I know that there's probably a large chunk of the fan base that groan when they hear, oh, they have all the same traits and they're going to pick the exact same player. Cool. My only rebuttal to that would be Nate Danielson was a lot like Marco Kasper, going back to his draft year. And I think Marco Kasper looked really, really good this year. When Nate Danielson eventually makes it to the NHL, I think he'll look really, really good. You can debate what the ceiling ultimately is, but I think I'm pretty confident that Marco Kasper is an NHL player. I'm actually pretty confident Nate Danielson will be an NHL player too. And I'm pretty confident Jake O'Brien will be an NHL player too, as well. And I think that he'll be able to play in a lot of minutes too because of his two-way ability, because of his competitive nature, and because of all these little traits that make him that prototypical Red Wings type of player.
So let me ask you something. You mentioned obviously that he has a similar vibe to Marco Kasper and Nate Danielson. Both of those players are also centers. Do you have any concern about the Red Wings have too many of the same, or just not diversifying enough in terms of types of talent on the roster? Because, another center after already having, Kasper and Danielson down the middle, There is obviously a lot to like about Jake O'Brien. If we ignore the position for a second, he had 98 points in 66 OHL games past season, point per game in the playoffs, has some size to him as well. But are you concerned about just, another of the same player?
Yeah, not too worried about the position at all. A center can turn into a winger fairly easily. A little bit harder to do the other way around, but um, I think that is a really good question, and one that we probably will revisit a few times between now and the draft. I do believe that it ultimately pays off to diversify your prospect pool. Because even if you don't have a need for this player, somebody else probably does. And, if you've ever played any board game or, GM mode on any sports video game, you know that it pays off to have assets that your opponents are interested in. Because they'll eventually give you something that you need for it. And then I would also maybe make the argument that that's also why it's okay if they kind of load up on the same player, because you can maybe monopolize that type of player, and at some point someone's going to want to come to that player. In fact, in my little notebook here, I kind of have a little question mark. If they drafted O'Brien, does that make Nate Danielson expendable? Does that make him now a prospect that you can maybe more comfortably include in trade talks because you have Nate Danielson 2.0 in your prospect pool as well? Well, like I said, I think we're going to revisit this topic a few times, but for my money, if I'm Steve Eisenman and I'm on the clock with whatever pick they end up with, I don't know that I'm looking for another Nate Danielson or another Marco Casper. I will take it if that is the best player available, but if I have my choice and there are options for me, I'm going to go for something that I don't already have, because this team is now in a position where they're pretty well stocked in their prospect pool, and now it's about filling in what they don't already have. There's a viable strategy in loading up on things you already have, but I think with where the Red Wings are right now, they need to start filling in the holes that they have, whether that's through trades and free agency or the draft.
So let me ask you this. Well, I have a series of questions for you. We're going to do a little bit of like this or that. I'm going to give you two prospects and say both are available to the Red Wings somehow. When they select at 12, tell me who you're drafting, and one of them will always be Jake O'Brien. So Jake O'Brien versus Jackson Smith.
Jackson Smith.
Oh, well, how about that? How about Jake O'Brien and Carter Bear?
I like Jake O'Brien better, so I will say him. But if we're kind of using this topic of what they don't have, there's definitely a really good argument to be made for Bear.
Fair point. Jake O'Brien or Kashan Atchison?
Atchison.
Okay.
Think about it.
Lastly, Jake O'Brien or Roger McQueen?
Roger McQueen, and I'll even give a small explanation for this one. I think Roger McQueen would be kind of the home run swing. And I really think the Red Wings, especially right now, are in a position where they can afford to take that type of swing. All
right. Great. So yeah, that was our first draft prospect profile of the offseason. There will be plenty more to come in the weeks leading up to the draft. And we'll get to some of the other players mentioned in the this or that there. So thank you for tuning in to episode 32 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I've been your host, Tony Wolak, and this has been Devin Little. And Evan, wishes he could be here, but the NFL draft is a lot of fun. So, wish him the best in that. And Devin, anything else to add before we close out today?
AHL playoffs, meaning Griffins, will be starting up next week, and I'm very excited about it.
All right. Go Griffins, go. All right. Thank you, everyone. It's been great, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.